Good evening, everyone. I'd like to now call to order the June 12th, 2023 meeting of the East Penn School District Board of School Directors. If you'll all please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. It's my understanding that there are no requests to address tonight. Okay, thank you. So we'll move on in the agenda. Next is approval of the minutes for the May 22nd, 23 meeting. May I have a motion? Any comments or questions? Okay, seeing none, Ms. Allen, please call the roll.
Mrs. Bowen?
Aye.
Ms. Bowman? Aye. Mr. Byrd?
Aye.
Mr. Falegi?
Aye.
Mr. Jankowski?
Aye.
Mr. Smith?
Aye.
Dr. Whitney?
Aye.
Dr. Levinson?
Aye.
8 ayes.
Thank you, Ms. Allen. Next on the agenda is the district update. Dr. Campbell.
Thank you. On May 9th, the district hosted an event with realtors in our community. We provided an overview of program offerings in our district and shared with the realtors some prospective information for new families to the district. In addition, we provided our realtors with an overview of our district website, highlights of new programs in our district, and they provided us with valuable insight on trends that they are seeing in terms of the housing market. And so I just wanted to take a moment to thank our realtors for partnering with us. Later that month, in the end of May, we hosted another event for our local preschool teachers in the East Penn community. Members of our Office of Teaching and Learning shared an overview of our kindergarten program and offered strategies that in ways in which we could support our preschool students with literacy and numeracy skills. And again, appreciate the collaborative partnership with our local preschool teachers. I also wanted to recognize the outstanding accomplishments of our 5th grade students from Willow Lane Elementary, including specifically Abigail Reichert, Charlotte Smith, Walter Gutenkunst, Elliot Holmes, Marion Benyea, Kayla St. Val, Madison McGinnis, Alyssa Powell, and Emilio Bencalzar. Those 5th grade students, by including their teacher Julia Dweck and their principal Dr. Anthony Moyer, developed a Willow Lane historical storybook trail, and on May 27th they dedicated that trail and were joined by members of Lower Macungie Township and the Lehigh County executive as well, Phil Armstrong. Our 5th grade students were assigned various topics of interest to research for the trail markers, again, all focusing on the history of Lower Macungie Township. And we invite our community members to stop out to Willow Lane Elementary to take a walk on the historical storybook trail. I'd also like to recognize the outstanding accomplishments of Emmaus High School cast and crew of Fiddler on the Roof. I haven't had a chance to update the community since the Freddie Awards were announced, but we really knocked it out of the park and received outstanding performance by an orchestra, outstanding use of lighting, outstanding performance by an actress in a supporting role, that was Emily Novak, outstanding ensemble. Student Achievement Award goes to Maeve Yanes, outstanding performance by an actor in a leading role, Jacob Kleindienst, and outstanding overall musical production, which is always a big one. We'd also like to congratulate the Emmaus High School academic team at the national competition. Our varsity team went 6-0 in Chicago, and the team advanced to finals, which was actually held virtually on June 9th. And members of that team are Thomas Flexer, Eric Welp, Sarvej Sengudaban, and Arth Shaw. We'd also like to congratulate and recognize our Emmaus High School athletes for some of their outstanding accomplishments. Dylan Darville was named Lehigh Valley Orthopedic Institute's Athlete of the Year. He received a live interview on PBS 39 during the broadcast and was awarded a $10,000 scholarship for his outstanding accomplishments academically, athletically, as well as an involved student citizen. We'd also like to recognize several Emmaus High School track and field athletes. Kyle Moore is the state champion in the long jump. In addition, Haley Reinhard was the only female runner in the state who participated in 3 individual state events, including the 3,200, the 1,600, and the 800, and she knocked it out of the park on all 3 events. So again, just another way in which our kids continue to excel. I'd like to thank and recognize the outstanding work of the Emmaus High School art department, as well as our student artists for doing a phenomenal job at the 2023 art show that was held about 2 weeks ago. I hope that our community was able to stop out and enjoy the amazing talents of our student artists at Emmaus High School. A few reminders as we now go into the summer season. Registration is now open for the Emmaus High School FCS Preschool Lab, which is held here at Emmaus High School, and we're accepting applications for our September 2023 opening of the class. For more information, please contact Heather Day at Emmaus High School. I also wanted to recognize that yesterday, as the community knows, we celebrated the graduation of the Emmaus High School senior class at the PPL Center. Specifically, we honored 703 seniors, and it was a dignified celebration of our students and their accomplishments. And I want to thank our students for the way in which they conducted themselves during the very special ceremony. I also thank our families and our staff and our community members who really all played a pivotal role in making the event memorable. I also wanted to take a moment just to recognize the outstanding student speakers that we had: Maddie Hess, Maddie Shelton, Ben Eustace, and Rihanna Estrade. Again, they very accurately captured how proud we are of them for their academic accomplishments, athletic accomplishments, their work as informed student citizens, and again, incredibly proud of all of our students. For any family members who might be interested in some summer activities, we invite you to check out a list of local summer camps and activities on our district website, readily available for our families. And just a final reminder, while schools are closed for students for this summer, we remind the community that our offices remain open. We are here to help. If there's anything you need, don't hesitate to reach out, starting with our office staff in all of our buildings. And again, we wish everyone a safe and healthy summer, and we are working really hard throughout the summer to have an awesome start to the 23-24 school year.
Okay. Thank you very much, Dr. Campbell. Are there any comments or questions from the board? Mr. Smith.
I just had one comment really quick. I wanted to thank administration for organizing the networking get-together with local realtors. I think that's been something that I've been looking to have here in East Penn. It's been done with success in other districts. I think that it's really important with the symbiotic relationship between a school district and its residents, and good schools impacting, raising demand for housing in a district, and obviously the families that live in those areas then become students in our schools. So I appreciate, especially now with our facilities inquiry team and the potential changes to the potential renovations and new schools or whatever the plan might be. There's a huge need for feedback and an ability to work together. So I'm glad we were able to make that happen, and I'm glad it was successful.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Smith. Ms. Bowman.
This is also a thank you. I did see, I think it was the high school posted a picture of the academic team competing, 3 of them in their graduation gowns, because the national competitions was basically at the same time as the processional for graduation. In order to make that happen, I have to imagine there were many adults feverishly trying to find a room at P&L that wasn't rented. Whatever happened behind the scenes to enable those kids to still have their experience of graduation and run right out of there and go to a competition in the same building. I think it's wonderful when people come together to make something very difficult happen, and obviously people came together to do that, and also just really impressed with the kids. So.
Thank you, Ms. Bowman. I guess I'll add, if what I read is correct, they came in 16th in the nation, so that's a great performance under a lot of activity. Any other, oh, sorry.
I'll add, Ms. Bowman, you made me reflect on one more piece. Again, just our sincere appreciation to all of our school board members who were in attendance at graduation yesterday. Tremendous showing by our administrative team, as well as just a great showing by our professional staff as well. Teachers from all levels of students' education were lining the center aisle of the graduates, and it's really kind of special, I'm sure, for our seniors to process and see maybe their elementary teachers sitting there to be a part of the event to celebrate them. So I think it is really a great commentary to all of our staff members who are so committed to our kids.
Thank you. Any other comments? I'd just like to reiterate, I think that was a wonderful list that Dr. Campbell made in terms of what's been going on over the last month and a half. Again, some truly remarkable things going on in our district, some of which I directly participated in or observed. So I'm very grateful for that. Okay, but before we move on, I did want to offer something on behalf of the board. I would like to congratulate Dr. Campbell for receiving the 22-23 Cooperative Leadership Award from the Lehigh University School Study Council. I believe you received the award around the 23rd of May. So again, it's nice to have the greater community recognizing the efforts that you put forth on behalf of the people in our district. So again, congratulations.
Thank you.
Okay, moving on. We have 4 items for the budget. If there are no objections, I'd like to take items A through D together as they are all connected. I may have a motion, please.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, are there any comments or questions? Ms. Bowman?
Yeah, it's more of a comment for moving forward. The homestead and farmstead resolution and the property tax rebate, it's my understanding that the state is finally going to, well, who knows what the state's actually going to do. People are talking about, on the state level, of revising the property tax rebate program to include higher incomes than what's currently in there and maybe some other changes. And I would just hope that we would be prepared when that happens. I know that we might not be able to match exactly what they do right away, but I hope we would move in that direction because it's sorely needed.
Okay, thank you for that comment. Anybody else?
I think, I'll share some information. I think, in full transparency to the community, the board adopted the proposed final budget on May 8th. And to sort of review what has transpired from May 8th until, what's changed in the document that we see before us this evening. So if the board is okay, I'll just take maybe 5 minutes or less to review
Thank you.
transpired.
Thank you,
Great.
Mr. Saul.
Thank you. So the first thing I'd like to say is, you may recall on May 8th that when we presented the budget, the proposed final budget, it included a 3.55% real estate tax increase. And at that time, we knew of some changes that would decrease that potentially to a 3.4% tax increase. And I want to assure the board at that time, I really felt that was sort of the ceiling and maybe a little lower. I did not at all at that time anticipate sort of where we would end up and where we are at this time. And so I want to talk about that a little bit. Two significant things in terms of revenue. We did take a closer look at the earnings on investments, and we worked with some of our banking partners to look at the current interest rate environment, the economic outlook, as well as the potential for interest earnings for the 2023-24 fiscal year. And as a result, we increased our interest earnings assumptions from $1 million to $1.26 million. Also, with regard to the basic education funding and special education funding, which I'll refer to as the BEF and SEF, shortly after the proposed final budget was adopted, Dr. Campbell and I met with Representative Schweier, who said to us something that we had heard before, but maybe said it in a different way. and said that, you know, the BEF and the SEF, his exact words were, the number that the governor proposed was a floor, not a ceiling. And as I talked about at that board meeting, you have to be careful about a single data point. So we started talking to other members of the General Assembly from both chambers, as well as our, you know, education professional organizations, the lobbyists that work for those organizations, to really hone in on that comment. And as we talked to them, sort of the theme was similar. The budget that the governor proposed had what most people consider a reasonable basic education and special education funding number, especially when you consider the cash position of the state at the moment, and when you consider the recent Pennsylvania education funding lawsuit, the decision that came about there. And so there's a general consensus that I think in the General Assembly that something needs to be done to start to move toward that. I think there are other areas, and this is what we heard, there are other areas of the state education funding, like level up funding, school construction funding, cyber school funding, minimum teacher pay, that are, quote, going to be the battleground areas. And I think if you looked at the the budget that was advanced from the House last week to the Senate, it proposed, I believe, $6 or $9 million, $600 or $900 million in addition to what the governor proposed. So these things, level up, school construction, were added. So I think that's, again, a testament to, I believe, those additions are going to be the battleground areas, right? Not BEF and SEF. So we really gained a level of comfort in terms of what the governor had proposed. What the governor proposed when it was run through the formula in March equated to a 10% increase for East Penn. You may recall that in the proposed final budget, we had put in a 3% increase for those two line items. I just want to sidestep for a minute and describe the process. So in March, the governor proposes an amount of money that is the increase for BEF and an amount of money for SEF. That is then run through the basic education and special education funding formulas. The formulas used data at that point in time, which is not the final data that will be used for the actual distributions. And the way those formulas work is the amount runs through the formula and you get a share. And so if everybody's share, their data goes up and everybody's share goes up, you really have the same, or everybody's amount goes up equally, you still have the same share. If your neighbor goes up some and you stay the same, your share goes down. If you go up and your neighbor goes down, your share goes up. So it's really about the share of the total increase. So to account for any adjustment in the share that we would receive, the budget includes a 9% increase, not the full 10% increase. Again, just to insulate or insure against any adjustments that could occur. However, we did capture most of that increase that was in the governor's budget. In the event, I mean, I think a reasonable question would be, okay, but what if we don't receive the full amount that was in the governor's budget, you know? I believe that we could weather that storm. The question isn't, I think at this point, whether or not there will be an increase. It's really about, is it the 10%? Is it 5%? So you have to remember that if the increase is less, it's going to be a percentage less, not no increase. And I certainly think, as I said, we could weather that storm. We would certainly need to look at the differential between what we budgeted and the increase, and you know, potentially curtail spending throughout the year and adjust for that in next year's budget. Admittedly, based on our conversations, I don't anticipate that we'll need to do that, but it is Harrisburg and anything can happen there, as they say. The other revenue adjustments that you see were just really what I'll call housekeeping items. You know, as we get closer, the numbers are refined, and so there are things like federal revenues that we have a better handle. We actually got our exact numbers, and so they've been adjusted. What that means then for the real estate tax increase is it was reduced from the 3.55% tax increase to a 2.51% tax increase. So pretty significant overall. On the expenditure side, again, mostly housekeeping items with tweaks in certain areas, wages to account for additional savings through retirements, as well as additional expenditures for market adjustments, fringe benefits in the areas of insurances, FICA and retirement were adjusted. Charter school tuition was adjusted for most up-to-date enrollment information in the charter schools. The facilities budget was updated for revised utility costs, which was actually a decrease from what we had budgeted previously. And then we adjusted the budgetary reserve to be at that 5% of the anticipated expenditure mark. I just wanted to comment, in addition to the budget, on the agenda, you'll find also a fund balance commitment resolution. This is the second year we've done that. That is for the board to solidify its intent to continue to use the funds that were set aside, the ESSER offset funds, for the intended purpose, which is to mitigate the effects of the learning loss of COVID-19 pandemic, and establishes that amount. There's also the Homestead Farmstead Resolution, which is an annual adoption as set forth in Act 1 of 2006. And finally, as was spoken about earlier, our property tax rebate program, which would continue at the same levels as the current year. And I believe with that, Dr. Campbell wanted to make some comments in terms of the programmatic impact.
Yeah, just to reiterate what Mr. Saul's opening statement regarding the budget process, just a reminder for the public in particular that tonight, as we take a look at the final budget, tonight really reflects a culmination of a process that we have started about 6 months ago. And so there are a series of 8 budget presentations that the administration made for the public and the board, specifically in March and April. Those were the 2 meetings at which in detail we outlined the priorities or those additional expenditures that were being proposed as part of the 23-24 budget. Those priorities are all aligned to district goals and include 7 elementary interventionists, 6 special education teachers, including 2 learning support at the elementary level, 2 learning support at the high school level, 1 autistic support at the high school, and 1 emotional support teacher at the high school. The priorities also include 2 support staff members, including an academic support assistant to support our high school students who qualify for ESL or English as a Second Language services, as well as a support staff member to support our VESPA and our STEP or transition program at the secondary level. And finally, there are also additional funds for safety and security, specifically to enhance our work with safety, or I should say our practices with safety and security at the middle level. As previously indicated, those safety and security resources may be personnel related. And once administration has a final recommendation, it would be our intent that we would bring that final recommendation to the board for public review and approval. Ideally, we wanted to earmark the funds for safety and security so that any further staffing and or resources that are needed, we could fully pursue those and have the funds available, again, to bring forth, obviously, to the board in terms of the exact way in which those funds would be used. So we really just wanted to highlight those again to be sure that the board as well as the public understand what is being proposed as part of tonight's final budget. And Mr. Saul, anything else to add?
The only thing I'll add, I was just thinking, is also the fantastic long-range fiscal and capital plan has been updated to reflect all of the information that was reviewed this evening.
For those who don't understand that, just watch last month's meeting.
Yes, Mr. Saul is a superhero. Okay, thank you for that overview. I apologize for not asking you to lead the discussion. I'll now turn it over for the board for comment. Mr. Byrd.
I just have one comment. I just want to thank the district and the staff for working very hard to bring this budget to the board tonight, and looking forward to next year. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Byrd. Mr. Jankowski.
I'd like to echo my thanks to Mr. Saul and Dr. Campbell and the administration. I think every year, the nerd in me will say the process gets better. And it's really informative and it's really helpful to understand what goes into the budget and why the numbers are what they are. So I really do appreciate the time and effort you put into it. Equally, I want to thank you for continuing to work through the budget to get to where we are today. I think it was really critical that we get the administration's priorities this year. I think that's critical for the benefit of our students as well as our teachers and staff, that we have these additional resources, while at the same time lessening the impact on the community. Obviously, no one wants to pay taxes. Unfortunately, it's the cost of doing business, and I think the outcome this year is a great outcome. It's a lower tax increase, although no one likes to say increase, but it's a lower increase than we've had over the last couple of years. So again, thank you for your hard work. Dr. Campbell, thank you for your hard work in bringing to us the priorities that you did. So again, I'm very happy to support this budget. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Jankowski. Any other comments? Ms. Bowman?
I've made these comments before, but I do think it's important, especially when voting on an increase for taxes, to publicly state why I'm voting a certain way. So in this case, as I've said before, I don't know how we couldn't do something about reading at the elementary level, given the numbers that we've seen. That's not addressing that problem. It's just not something that I think any of us would be comfortable with, given the ramifications year after year after year, all the way into the future, where you have 40% of your graduating class below reading level, going out into the community and not being able to really get the kind of jobs that they deserve. So I'm really happy that the administration is being proactive on a problem that's probably countrywide right now, and that we're trying to do as much as we can to bring these kids up to reading level as fast as possible. And that's why I'm comfortable voting for this budget. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Bowman. Additional comments? Mr. Byrd?
Just one last comment. I want to make sure that it's a complete understanding. This is a tax rate increase, not a tax increase.
Okay, thank you for that. All right, well, I'll just say a few things. I do think what my colleagues had just said previously, I share all that point of view. I think, it was right for Ms. Bowman to emphasize that, this budget is looking to proactively address the needs of our students and to make improvements. I do think that the administration should be recognized for continually working on the numbers and to help drive down the tax rate increase to something significantly lower than what we originally thought even just 3 weeks ago. So, again, as Mr. Jankowski said, having gone through this budget process multiple years now, I do think the process does get better every year in terms of understanding what it is we're doing, why we're doing it, and what we can relate to the community in terms of the information that's available to then, explain what goes into the budget and then how we can justify the priorities. I will also mention, I know I mentioned this some time ago in talking about the budget, I do think that it is remarkable, particularly in some inflationary times, that we were able to get the tax rate as low as we did. I am grateful that the state is taking a better look at how it funds public education in the state. And, Ms. Bowman's original comment about the property tax rebate program, again, it's good that the state is looking at that to try and help some of our most vulnerable taxpayers that are in the district. And I would anticipate that the district would take a look at how we manage our program and make sure that, that we can do something fiscally responsible that again, is aimed at helping our low-income residents. So again, I'm very grateful for this process. I hope that the community does recognize that this is a difficult thing. There's a lot of competing priorities and what we can do to best balance that in terms of what we do on behalf of our students, how we managed and to both attract and retain the awesome employees that we have, and also being sensitive to what we're asking the community to do in order to support that. So I personally will be voting in favor of all 4 of these items when we do take a vote. Any additional comments? Okay, Ms. Allen, will you please call the roll?
Ms. Bowman?
Aye.
Mr. Byrd?
Aye.
Mr. Falegi?
Aye.
Mr. Jankowski?
Aye.
Mr. Smith?
Aye.
Dr. Whitney?
Aye.
Mrs. Bowen?
Aye.
Dr. Levinson?
Aye. Okay, thank you very much. Next on the agenda is personnel. Before we make a motion, I would like to make an announcement that there were some updates. The following updates were made to the personnel agenda, and board docs has been updated accordingly to reflect these changes. So the first is the heading on item 4, professional employee appointment was added. On item 5, temporary professional employee appointment, we're adding that Tori O'Connell has rescinded the offer. And for support staff appointments, Ms. Kimberly Heidler, remedial assistant, the correct building assignment is Willow Lane. And for Michelle Posh and Ashley Valerio, health room nurse positions, we added their building assignment, which is EHS. So I'd like to get a motion on item A, please.
So moved.
Second.
Are there any comments or questions? Okay, seeing none, Ms. Allen, please call the roll.
Mr. Byrd?
Aye.
Mr. Falegi?
Aye.
Mr. Jankowski?
Aye.
Mr. Smith?
Aye.
Dr. Whitney?
Aye.
Mrs. Bowen? Ms. Bowman?
Aye.
Dr. Levinson?
Aye.
8 ayes.
Thank you, Ms. Allen. Item B is to approve the Teamsters Union Local 773 collective bargaining agreement. May I have a motion?
So moved. Second.
Are there any comments or questions? I'd just like to make a note that I'd like to express my appreciation to both the members of the Teamsters group and also the administrative and board team in terms of the negotiations and bringing forth what is obviously a fair contract, and in recognition of the the fine efforts that our custodial staff brings to our district. If there are no more comments, Ms. Allen, would please call the roll?
Mr. Falegi?
Aye.
Mr. Jankowski?
Aye.
Mr. Smith?
Aye.
Dr. Whitney?
Aye.
Mrs. Bowen?
Aye.
Ms. Bowman?
Aye.
Mr. Byrd?
Aye.
Dr. Levinson?
Aye.
8 ayes.
Thank you, Ms. Allen. We're going to roll things back a little bit. Dr. Campbell has some comments on what we've just approved for the personnel agenda.
Yeah, actually, I'll comment on both of them, one of which is I appreciate our work with our Teamsters as well as the board in terms of coming to an agreement, and certainly look forward to just having our continued Teamsters as part of our district community. The other piece that I wanted to comment on was specifically related to the personnel item, agenda item A. Within that, the board accepted the retirement of Mary Ann Fry, who's been a remedial assistant at Shoemaker Elementary for 21 years, and certainly wanted to thank her for her outstanding service to our students at Shoemaker. In addition, the board this evening appointed Dan Cullen as our special education supervisor for Emmaus High School, effective for the start of the upcoming school year. We're optimistic that he might be here perhaps sometime over the summer. I will share that, and the board and the community, I think, has often heard me say this in terms of it can be very difficult to find good educational leaders, and it can be almost impossible to find good educational leaders specifically in the area of special education. And so we are so very fortunate to be welcoming Dan Cullen to the East Penn team. He brings 16 years of experience, many of which are in leadership in the area of special education. Most recently, he's coming to us from a program director at Colonial IU. And Dan is here this evening, and so I do invite him up to come up and just meet each board member. Welcome, Dan.
Welcome, Dan.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Thank you very much.
Welcome.
Thank you very much.
Congratulations.
I'm so excited. Yeah, congratulations to see you again.
Congratulations again. So glad you're here. Yeah.
So grateful to be here.
Great.
Congratulations. Welcome aboard.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
I'll be seeing you.
Likewise. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you all so much.
Thanks, Dan.
Thank you.
Excited.
Okay, so that concludes our personnel items. Next is business operations. If there are no objections, I'd like to take items A through G together. May I have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Okay, are there any comments or questions from the board? Ms. Bowman?
We're A through G, right?
Yep.
Yeah, just wanted to point out the donation for the free and reduced lunch, offsetting that. I think this is, Kindness is Magic has made this donation in the past before. Just really grateful. Different organizations have been offsetting these costs for several years now, and it's appreciated.
Okay, thank you. Any other comments or questions? I'll echo the same comment from Ms. Bowman. I am very grateful when the community, sets out to, to help those in need within the district. So by way of example, the donation from Kindness is Magic is definitely wonderful and helpful for those students who need it. I would also like to recognize the donation from the East Penn Education Foundation to help fund the Library 2.0 program at Shoemaker Elementary School. The foundation has made a series of donations for Library 2.0 for the Library 2.0 program at multiple schools now, and again, I'm grateful for that support. Any other comments or questions? Okay, seeing none, Ms. Allen, please call the roll.
Mr. Falegi,
Aye.
Mr. Jankowski,
Aye.
Mr. Smith,
Aye.
Dr. Whitney,
Aye.
Mrs. Bowen,
Aye.
Ms. Bowman,
Aye.
Mr. Byrd,
Aye.
Dr. Levinson.
Aye.
Ayes.
Thank you, Ms. Allen. Next on the agenda is curriculum. I believe we have a presentation on the Lower Macungie Middle School Targeted Support and Improvement.
As our team comes up and gets ready, specifically our team from Lower Macungie Middle School, we have Sally Encho, who's our principal at Lower Macungie Middle School, and Deneen Lashinsky, who's our instructional specialist at Lower Macungie Middle School. And their goal this evening is to provide the board with an overview of the targeted support and improvement plan for Lower Macungie Middle School that will be in effect for the upcoming school year. They're going to start off by sharing a little bit about, in terms of the background of the plan and why this plan must be submitted to the Pennsylvania Department of Education. But the other piece that I want to emphasize is that regular planning for improvement is something that all of our school teams do. And so tonight, this particular plan is being called out in particular for some compliance with a PDE, an expectation because of performance of one of our subgroups. But I just want to emphasize again, really the takeaway that analyzing how our students perform on state assessments and other assessments is a regular part of our work in the district. And while we're focusing on a plan for a targeted group of students, which is very important, it's really part of a bigger process in terms of continual improvement in the organization.
Right. Thank you, Dr. Campbell, and thank you to the board for allowing us to present to you tonight. And as Dr. Campbell just stated, while we will be focusing on a specific group of students, which is why LMMS was designated for targeted support and improvement, I want to reassure you that the plan that we're putting in place is for all of the students at Lower Macungie Middle School for next year, not just those designated students. Before I begin to give you a little bit of background, I just wanted to recognize, and I will not read them by name because they are in front of you, but that this work that we've compiled since February of this year was not just Deneen and I, but it was commitment from all of the individuals that you see in front of you, which included everyone from teachers to our psychologists, to counseling, to OTL, to instructional support staff. So it really was a combined force to kind of delve into and really dig deep into our PSSA data, our PVOS data, and the ESSA dashboard information, along with our current behavior, academic, and truancy concerns as well. So I want to thank all the individuals who are listed here for their support with this plan. So a little bit of background about why Lower Macungie Middle School was designated with TSI was Every Student Succeeds Act, the ESSA, requires the states to annually designate schools for targeted support and improvement. So we were notified in February of 2023 that the LMMS was in TSI. So a TSI designation occurs, as we said, when a subgroup of students, which is 20 or more students, meets a specific two-step criteria. And the subgroup of students who qualified and met this criteria for this designation are our economically disadvantaged students. So the first step was a group of students, or these 20 or more students, exhibits achievement at or below the statewide average achievement rate of 36.23% on the math and ELA PSSA exams combined. And then also fall within a specific state-level proficiency growth profile that includes both achievement and growth value as measured through our PVOS, the Pennsylvania Value Added Assessment System. And then step two, if we meet all of the goals in step one, is that either we need to look at our ESSA required indicators, which don't apply to us because that's for mainly high school and graduation rate, but we need to look at the second set, which is our state-selected indicators, which would focus on our regular attendance and career standards benchmarks. So the indicator one was achievement and growth in ELA and math during the 21-22 school year. So our economically disadvantaged students achieved at or below the statewide average of 36.23. Our percentage for those economically disadvantaged last year was 30.42%. And then the second step was our PVOS growth, which was less than 10, which was negative 5.3, which indicates that we have a lot of work to do with our growth standard. So our goal, of course, is to develop and enhance quality educational and instructional programs in math and ELA to, again, improve the performance for all students, not just our economically disadvantaged. And I'm going to turn it over to Deneen, who's going to talk about our action steps at LMMS that we are putting in place in order to meet this first indicator goal.
So what steps do we need to take as far as our academic goals? So first of all, we have Tier 2 and Tier 3 targeted reading and math research-based interventions in place. We set up Tier 1 data meetings with all of our teachers, and we review strategies and best practices as well as their own data, which does include our Fast Bridge screening, our iReady data, PSSA, and PVOS. We moved one of our highly qualified math teachers to a math standards position so that we could see our students grow with that highly qualified math teacher. We have weekly MTSS, academic and behavioral meetings with all 10 of our teams. So we designate this time with our teams to really look at data, discuss our students, and see how we can meet their needs during their core instruction. We have weekly core meetings. So our core team is made up of our guidance counselors, our school counselors, our principal, our different people from OTL, and our psychologist. And we review attendance, academic, and behavioral supports. monthly special ed meetings with our middle level supervisor, where they also take a look at data and best practices to see how we can improve. iReady time is built into our daily schedule for all students during ninth period, and we started that this year, and we've really seen success with our students using iReady, and we're seeing growth. Increased content team planning, which allows for our teams, our content teams, to not only plan and talk about instructional practices, but also to do learning walks where they're learning from each other. So we've incorporated that during our team times in our school, 3 days out of the 5-day cycle. So they can use the other 2 days as team time to talk about students and planning for their team. We are, in the next school year, going to have monthly learning walks. We started to do that this year a little bit with, we called it Pineapple Day, where we opened up our classrooms and had learning walks. And we did that a few times this year, but now we're going to have them monthly. And our teachers are actually really excited about this because they had a lot of takeaways. Continuing with some action steps, we have child study meetings with our staff, students, and families. So this is another way in which we can provide supports for our students by having families come in and problem solve along with us when we see there is a need in academic situations. All staff members are required to evaluate their own curriculum and find ways that they could support learning standards in each grade level. So we met with our exploratory team. We, for instance, identified an area of need where students in 6th grade, this is just an example, using ratio concepts was an area of need. So we had 55% of our students proficient. Therefore, and there's some examples up there, FCS, or Family Consumer Science, jumped in and said, hey, we can help out with that standard, and we'll review fractions when cooking. Music also stepped in and said, we can work on that with time signatures and note lengths. Tech Ed said, we can help too in designing a scaled down floor plan of a house. And Art said, we can do this, no problem. We do it with mixing paint, enlarging photos and grid drawings and clay shrinkage, which I didn't really know what that was until they told us, but it's how to make a lid fit on that pot. We are looking at realigning some of our priority standards in math and ELA as a district. So that's some curriculum work that's happened this school year and into the summer. And we have SEL supports in place, such as SAP, MARS, CIS, LVHN, BCBA, our Dean of Student, our Student Advisor, our STEP program, Check-in, Check-out, or CICO, and we have a SWIBS framework in place because, as we all know, we can't learn until we have our basic needs met. So that whole philosophy of Maslow before Bloom. Teachers did a deep dive into Panorama with that in mind at the end of our school year to take a look at the survey data and discover areas of student need and create goals moving into next year for each team.
Turn it back over. Our second indicator was our attendance rate for 21-22. And just as background, chronic absenteeism was calculated based on the number of students who missed more than 10% of their enrolled school days across the academic year. So we were looking at any students who missed 18 or more school days. And they're calculated regardless of whether absences are excused or unexcused. So LMMS attendance for our economically disadvantaged subgroup this past year was 72.40, and the target was 72.51. So of course, we're always looking at ways to improve the regular attendance rate for all students.
So then action steps. What are we going to do to help with this indicator? So we have those regular core meetings. As we mentioned before, we review attendance on a bi-weekly basis. And if we notice that we have children with attendance issues, we may have a child study meeting with staff, students, and families once again. We have SAP meetings that are happening monthly and that is more of a regular basis than it was last year, which is good news. We have a wonderful step room teacher that reaches out to our chronically absent students to engage in conversations about utilizing the step room as a way to encourage students back into the building during challenging times. And she goes out of her way to make families feel comfortable and students feel comfortable, and that is a huge part of our success. So we have other provisions and resources. We have regular attendance monitoring by school staff, including case managers, administrators, and our school counselors. We schedule and have program adjustments accordingly. And we have truancy prevention programs and, if need be, truancy court. So we have interventions and support to provide a partnership with communities and schools for our participating students and their families. We also connect families with outside services through KNS or MST, which is an outside agency that helps do wraparound services for family with truancy concerns. We have a school and district social worker that helps communicate and provide additional supports, and she also attends our core meetings. And in particular, she helps with the McKinney-Vinto families as well, which is our homeless population. I'm going to turn it back over to Mrs. Yencha.
And the last indicator is our career standards benchmark. Effective in 2023 to 2024 and beyond, all of our students by May of their 8th grade year must have 6 pieces of evidence in their career portfolio. And last year, our economically disadvantaged group, we only had 59.13% of them meeting this goal. And of course, the target is 75.87. So looking at ways to increase this percentage of students who complete all 6 pieces of evidence in their career portfolio.
So what are we doing to address our career standards benchmarks? We're continuing that awareness K to 12 through our counseling plan. We embed career portfolio assignments into course curriculum as part of our students' requirements in their coursework. And once again, our team stepped up and they offered to help in different ways. So for instance, in science, they do an application to NASA and a reflection. That's an example of a career artifact. They would do a resume on a famous figure in history, and that would take place in social studies. They might do a project. It's called the $1 Million Project. If you had $1 million, what would you do with it? That would be a math project. So different ways in which the various subject areas can help with our career standards benchmark. And on a good news end, we had some PSSA early reporting, and we wanted to share this with you. And although we are in targeted school improvement for our economically disadvantaged subgroup, we wanted to give you an overall idea of our PSSA proficiency. And again, these aren't definitely set in stone. It was just our early reporting numbers so far. So if you take a look at the chart, we are growing our students, although we may not be where we want to be, but we still see growth in each grade level with our proficiency levels from 2022 to 2023. And then when you look at the cohort growth from 6th to 7th, there's 4%, and from 7th to 8th, there's 6%. So that's ELA proficiency. And then in math, we see an even greater result here. So definitely growing from 6th to 7th, 7th to 8th, 8th to 9th, from 2022 to 2023. But the cohorts in particular, 6th to 7th grew 14%, 7th to 8th grew 12%. So again, not where we'd like to be, but still moving in the right direction, which is great news.
Right, and a huge shout out to our teachers and our school counselors for really helping us with this career readiness benchmark. Our preliminary data shows fabulous results. We are looking at growing from 78% last year to 95% or above for this year. So really made a lot of growth by kind of buckling down and making sure that our counselors were meeting with each eighth grader individually in order to make sure that they were set up to ready to move on to the high school with their full career portfolio. So the last piece is just a timeline to share with you. Of course, February, as we stated before, was when we got notification of TSI. From March through May, our team engaged in the analysis of all this data, the discussion of our priorities, and then, of course, developing this improvement plan. We're presenting it to you tonight, and then, of course, if approved, from March through of 2023, when we first started implementing some of these things with our teachers, through all of next year, we will continue to implement these action plans and anything else that we develop over the summer. Thank you for your time, and we are happy to take any questions.
Okay, thank you to our presenters. Ms. Bowman.
Yeah, just a clarifying question first. When your PSSA slide, slide number 14, for the ELA, are those your whole school, or are they just the targeted group?
That is correct. That is the total school right now. We did not, we just got the early reporting results, so we haven't been able to dig down as deep as we wanted to yet. So full school results.
And so we're seeing growth in all these measures, but a lot of the things that you listed, you started doing a lot of these things before you found out that you were in, that the state was targeting us for improvement. What parts of this did you add after you learned of that in February, or is everything in here something that was already in progress?
I would say specifically with career standards benchmark, we knew that we weren't giving this nearly as much time as we should have been with kids returning from COVID and last year, us really focusing on mental health. So I will say the career readiness benchmark is one of the areas where we really knew that we needed to focus on after we got the designation of TSI. I don't believe had we had dug into the data that deeply that we would have been as successful this year without that designation and it coming to the forefront. I will say that I think, I'm just going to go back to this slide. The team time and us changing the way we run our team meetings and requiring them to meet with departments is going to be very new. That's not something that we did before because we realized through the systems benchmarking training that we had gone to under Dr. Campbell that one of the best indicators is for our teachers to pull together and talk about best practices and activities for kids. So that is something that will be very different, and the learning walks will be something that's very different for next year.
Can you explain what some of those things are? There was a lot of school educator terminology in here. When someone goes on a learning walk, or was that whatever you said was pineapple time or something?
Yes, pineapple day.
What is that?
It is when teachers are opening up their classrooms to come and see what's going on. And in particular, we asked them this year to focus on some of the things that we were learning about from our district professional development. And so what does that look like in the classroom? So for instance, SEL, like where are we seeing students thriving in the classroom? What are we noticing the students are doing? How are the students learning? So the focus is really on the student learning and the student achievement. And so they're able to go in and visit for a period, or maybe they go in for just 20 minutes of a period to learn from each other. And then at the end of the day, what we were doing during our faculty meeting time is having department debriefs. So they were able to discuss, you know, I noticed this in a classroom, or I noticed that, and they're able to collaborate and say, hey, this is something I can take away and put into my own practice and my own learning. And that's something else that came out of our systems benchmarking, is that many countries that are very successful have this practice in place where they're providing this opportunity for teachers. And I think sometimes we as teachers are in silos and we're doing wonderful things, but no one else knows, and we need to also have that culture of learning amongst ourselves. So that's a great question.
Can you also speak a little bit to the diagnostic process that you used to come up with these particular steps? I mean, I know you were already aware of what the test scores and certain things were, but what led you to pick these action steps over the whole universe of other things that you could have put in place?
It was really a collaboration and, again, thinking about and learning about research and best practices. And as Mrs. Yencho mentioned, we had learned that through systems benchmarking, content planning is really important for teachers to have that time together to collaborate and plan and put together best practices. So we're giving them that time through that department planning time and as well as those learning walks. So certainly some of these things, as Dr. Campbell mentioned, are already in place because we see our data, we are reacting to it, and we're proactive with what we're doing, in our school, as many of our schools are. And we knew that we needed to step in and do more when we saw our results. So as we said to the team, this is something that is part of our normal culture, that we are looking at data and responding to data and doing what's best for kids.
I was happy to see you mention the STEP program. I've actually heard good things about that from different parents who mentioned it really did make the difference between their child not coming to school and coming to school. So I'm happy that we move forward with that. And also happy to hear how you're trying to teach math in different ways. It's so important with these tough concepts that kids learn it during an activity that they actually are interested in. So I think that's great. With this cohort, it's such a small number of students. It seems like you would be able to almost talk to them and find out exactly why each one's not coming to school, or is any of that going on? We're only talking about, I think you said 20 kids here.
Right, I just want to clarify that that's a state designation, that a group is 20 or more students. We have over 200 economically disadvantaged students, so it is quite a large number. But honestly, there are conversations happening with all of these support services that are in place. So student advisors, administrators, instructional support, communities and schools, our LVHN therapist is involved. So we are reaching out to those families, the STEP program, to have as many individualized conversations as we can with those students, absolutely.
Okay, that's wonderful. Yeah, I think that's really important because I think sometimes when we peel back the layers on these things, our old methods of, okay, I'm just going to warn the parent that their kid needs to come to school, in a lot of these complicated situations really isn't enough. So I'm really happy to see that you have a whole group of people trying to really understand what's going on.
Right, and I know we spoke about check-in and check-out and the success that we saw at LMMS before, but that honestly is one of the best programs that we have running in our school now. And it's not just the administrators who are doing it, but all teachers are involved in that to also meet with many of these kids every day in the morning and afternoon to check in with them.
It's wonderful, thank you.
Sure, you're welcome.
Jankowski.
Thank you, and thanks for the effort your team put into this. One of the questions, my question, you kind of addressed it, I think, with one of Ms. Bowman's questions, but so it's a pretty intensive program you put together for this cohort. Are these steps that you could also utilize and piggyback for other students, not necessarily this cohort? I mean, it's great to see that we're getting some positive results. Obviously we want to see those much higher, but is this stuff you already have in process for the other students who are having similar issues, just not economically disadvantaged?
Exactly. Everything that you see here is for all 1,049 students at LMMS right now. So we are not just focused on economically disadvantaged, because when you look at the data, all of our students deserve these supports and need to grow. So we decided we weren't just going to focus on one group. Definitely we need to focus on economically disadvantaged, but all of these things will be implemented for everyone.
And is this being shared with like IRE and I mean, to the extent it's applicable to EMAIS, so that we have a consistent steps and programs in place for our students?
Yeah, oh, go ahead. No, just many of the things that we have in place are part of our MTSS framework. So that's good news. As I was talking about the data meetings and using the data, it may look slightly different from one building to another, but we all have similar practices in place. And putting together the Tier 2 and Tier 3 targeted reading and math research-based interventions. IRE is doing that as well, and we just started that whole rollout last year in bringing on our interventionists. So yes, we are very much in line, and we have regular meetings. We have regular MTSS district-wide meetings to make sure we are following a similar framework. And the child study process is also part of that as well.
Great, thanks a lot.
Mr. Smith?
Yeah, thank you for the presentation. I just wanted to, if I may, editorialize a little bit for some context for my colleagues and folks living at home, or tuning in from home, I should say. And having gone through this myself, when a TSI designation comes through, it's a little bit like, oh God, really? And so it's a lot bit deflating to the team at the school that receives that designation. Because by the time that indicator comes through and you receive that, if this is a PDE compliance activity is really what it comes down to. And we're asking our teams to travel at the glacial speed of PDE and bureaucracy to say, okay, let's look at this data and come up with a plan. Well, if we as a district, and I mean that as a district, not as an LMS team, but if we as a district followed that same glacial path, we would not see the results that we saw and the growth in those cohorts. Because the data that we're looking at, and this is important to keep this in perspective, the data that we're looking at is really from sixth graders who are going to be eighth graders, that if we were following that glacial pace, we wouldn't be implementing any of these plans that we would be taking a look at from being notified 4 months ago. We wouldn't be implementing them until they were eighth grade. So we're looking that there's two groups of kids that were part of that data that would no longer even be part of the school by the time we were able to implement it. So that's important context to keep that. Not only is this not a deep, lasting reflection of the team at LMS, but what I take away from this and choose to take away from this is that the list of detailed action steps, to me, none of this felt new. This was all MTSS. This was all things we've talked about in the past and different interventions we've already had in place and before, obviously well before February. And so the growth that is reflected in some of that preliminary data from this year is really a reflection of the fact that we have a team that is capable of looking at data, that is capable of identifying where their needs are and what the next steps need to be, independently of the PDE who's saying, hey, you are a TSI school. Well, okay, so we don't have to worry about saying, okay, now what? Because we already know what the now what is. And so no real concerns or questions for me because I'm pretty familiar with the process, but I just wanted to make sure that at least I recognize the team for being able to do all of that independently of having the state come through and saying, hey, now you need to do this thing. So it's already in place, so thank you for that.
Thank you,
I think
Mr.
that was helpful context.
Thank you, Mr. Smith.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Smith. Ms. Bowen?
I actually have a comment very similar to Mr. Smith's. The slide where you addressed Maslow's hierarchy of needs and Bloom's taxonomy, I hope anyone listening to the meeting sort of blows up that graphic because I think it's really important that we all understand the scope of care and intervention that you are providing to students. I think probably regardless of whether or not they're in this subgroup or not. And I think for those who aren't maybe teachers by trade and haven't had that ingrained in their brains for 20 years, I think it's an important thing for the audience to view.
Thank you, Mrs. Bowen.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Bowen. Mr. Byrd?
I don't have a question. I just want to say thank you. I came in this meeting expecting to hear something different, but after hearing the presentations, really appreciate all the hard work you've done ahead of the PDA identifying what you had, but appreciate what you're doing. You've covered a lot of bases, which thought we'd miss a lot, but you seem to hit on everything and looking at every corner and every crack to make sure you cover everything and make sure the students have what they need. So thank you very much.
Thank you,
and your
Mr. Byrd.
staff, thank you.
Appreciate that.
Thank you, Mr. Byrd. Any additional comments or questions? Okay, so I'd like to reiterate what my colleagues said. Again, thank you for the effort. Thank you for and as Mr. Smith clarified, the proactive efforts that have been done leading up to the time period when the TSI was received and already taking actions for that. I am curious about one thing. So there are a lot of action steps listed, particularly for indicators 1 and 2. Does this represent additional time and effort by the teachers and staff at the school, or are we kind of reallocating time, effort, and attention to change the emphasis in order to meet the needs of the students?
I'd say reallocating time, so we're just making use of our team time, for example, in a different way.
Okay.
So, we are doing that with our learning walks and with our content team planning. So, just using that time wisely, I guess you'd say.
Okay, all right. So it's kind of would you call it in a way a continuous improvement type of way of looking at how things are done?
Correct, and taking back the research that we have done, I think, over the past year in preparation for making some changes at LMMS to share with teachers, to go back to the basic of the why behind we are doing these things and getting everybody on board with the purpose of it.
Okay. Thank you very much. If there are no further questions, again, would you have some comments?
I just had a final closing comment because I really appreciate the reflective feedback from the board. Mr. Smith, I think you sort of hit the nail on the head in terms of when we as educators receive some sort of designation from the state in terms of targeted support and improvement, it can be deflating because we recognize the depth and breadth of needs that our students have, and we know how very hard all of our teams, including our teachers and our administrators at LMMS, are working to meet those needs. And again, I think our administrative team has been very forthcoming in saying that, yes, we have standardized assessment data, including student achievement on PSSAs or Keystones and PVOS data, and we know we can do better, and we want to do better for our kids. So we are never shying away from that data. At the same time, I think tonight's presentation, again, to bring this to closure, really does reflect, and I appreciate the board recognizing it reflects many, not all, but many strategies, supports, frameworks that we have put in place system-wide when we talk about MTSS and tiered systems of support. I appreciate you seeing those dots connecting, and Ms. Bowen, the important piece about the absolute need for us to be attentive to the emotional learning needs of our students so that they can succeed academically is critical as well. So I just wanted to close on, and appreciate the board's recognition of those many pieces that sort of fit together in this puzzle. And thank you to Sally and to Deneen and your entire team for your just continued dedication and really sincere and excellent efforts to support our kids and help them be successful.
Thank you, Dr. Campbell. Thank you to the board.
Okay, thank you. And again, we look forward to, in a year, seeing the positive impact of these efforts. Again, thank you for your presentation. Okay, moving on to still within curriculum, items B and C, educational conferences, and an update to the 23-24 East Bend School District calendar, student-teacher calendar. May I have a motion to take items B and C together?
So moved.
Second.
Are there any comments or questions from the board? Okay, seeing none, Ms. Allen, please call the roll.
Mr. Jankowski,
Aye.
Mr. Smith,
Aye.
Dr. Whitney,
Aye.
Mrs. Bowen,
Aye.
Ms. Bowman,
Aye.
Mr. Byrd,
Aye.
Mr. Pelagi,
Aye.
Dr. Levinson.
Aye.
8 ayes.
Thank you, Ms. Allen.
Can I make a comment? May I make a comment?
Oh, sure. Dr. Campbell.
Sorry, I keep interjecting this evening. I just really wanted to clarify for the community that although the revisions to the student-teacher calendar, this is not a substantive change to any plans that families may have already made. Specifically, what we adjusted in the 23-24 calendar is for our middle school families. We changed the dates of the middle school conferences, the early dismissal days, and the days when we have middle school conferences, so that those dates are aligned with the end of the trimester. You might recall earlier in the year, we talked to the board and the public about changes in our reporting. And so this change now accurately brings everything to a close. And Mr. Smith, I think you may have even asked the question a couple months ago when we talked about reporting. So I just want to clarify that that's what the change that was approved tonight.
Thank you. That was an important thing to bring up. Any other comments or questions? Okay, moving on to legislative. This is to appoint voting delegates from the East Penn School Board to participate in the PSBA Delegate Assembly coming up in early November. I'm very grateful to 3 of our members for stepping up to represent us. Ms. Bowman, Mr. Byrd, and Mr. Falagi have put their hats in the ring here. Is there anybody else? Okay. All right. We should all be grateful for their willingness to serve. So with that, I'd like to make a motion, or I'm sorry, I'd like to have somebody make the motion to bring Mr. Byrd, Ms. Bowman, and Mr. Falagi to be our representatives for the PSBA Delegate Assembly.
So moved.
Second.
Okay. Are there any comments or questions? Seeing none, Ms. Allen, please call the roll.
Mr. Smith?
Aye.
Dr. Whitney?
Aye.
Mrs. Bowen?
Aye.
Ms. Bowman?
Aye.
Mr. Byrd?
Aye.
Mr. Pelagi?
Aye.
Mr. Jankowski?
Aye.
Dr. Levinson?
Aye.
8 ayes.
Thank you, Ms. Allen. Okay, moving on, other educational entities. Mr. Champagne is not here. Would normally provide the update for LCTI JOC meeting, so in his stead, you are going to be stuck with me. So I'd like to report that the JOC from LCTI met on May 24th last month. I can easily say that the highlight of the meeting was the meeting opening with an in-person recognition of career and technical student organization, national and international attendees. We had multiple students come and talk about themselves and their experiences from the various groups. Unfortunately, I don't have these are all acronyms. DECA, FBLA, FCCLA, HOSA, and Skills USA. From what we were told, this was the most students that LCTI has ever had advancing to competitions, and so that's really saying something for how engaged our students are and how talented they are. So this was a celebration of these students' achievements, and obviously we wish them great success in their upcoming CTSO events and all their future endeavors. There were administrative team reports. There was an update on the LVHN Behavioral Health Program. They talked about the 5th grade tours being very successful. They were held from May 8th through the 19th, and they had representation from all 37 schools that are in the coverage area. 155 groups, 301 student ambassadors participated to help shepherd the students through, and over 3,800 students participated in the tours. They gave an enrollment and application update. There were over 1,000 applications processed. They see 1,300 students returning to the programs, and they're seeing things getting tighter next year in terms of capacity. So LCTI is thriving and trending upward. They mentioned that the IT firewall was updated. There are various grant applications that were submitted. There was an adoption of a revised health and safety plan. The Pennsylvania Miss Amazing event that was held was supported by cosmetology students who did this to support as community service. And they provided an adult education update covering things like financial aid, the updating of the handbook policy catalog, and the small business management workshop. We approved the 23-24 proposed capital projects, facility budget, technology budget, and CTSO budget. We approved and advanced facilities-related items and agreements. We approved a policy. In public relations, we discussed plans for Senior Recognition Night, which was held on May 31st. 560 students were recognized. And we discussed plans for Camp LCTI being held from 6:20 through 6:23, and at that point, back on May 24th, there were 146 registrants at that time. This was impressive. Social media hits exceeded 63,000 in the month of April, so a lot of activity and action and interest. In education, we discussed the student service advisory activities, NOCTI scores, calendar revisions, and the L-Tri-C entrance exams. We approved tuition enrollment agreements with Pennsylvania Cyber Charter and with the Pennsylvania Leadership Charter School. We voted to appoint Gary Fedorsha, who is a JOC member from Northwestern Lehigh, to be treasurer for the 23-24 school year. And we conducted other routine business, approving items for adult education, grants, personnel, curriculum, conferences, OAC, field trips, CTSO events, bid recommendations, financial reports, and miscellaneous agreements and actions. And that concludes my report. Are there any questions or comments from the board? Okay. Next month, you'll get Mr. Champagne again. There are no other items, so a couple announcements. We did hold an executive session tonight where we discussed a personnel matter. Our next regular board meeting is going to be on Monday, June 26th, so in 2 weeks, here at 7:30. And with no further business, I'd like to take a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, say nay. Thank you, good evening, and have a good night.